It is indeed such people who can often turn tactical losses into strategic victories. And on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the Kargil War, we are indeed honored to meet and hear about some such heroes who are here on this dais, and some about whom the book has been written, who redefined courage, valor, and statesmanship against the backdrop of these history-changing times. We are indeed honored to have with us such an eminent panel of luminaries today. And on behalf of Konark Publishers Pvt. Limited, I take great pleasure in welcoming you all on the occasion of the release of the book, A Prime Minister to Remember, Memories of a Military Chief by Admiral Sushil Kumar. Our heartiest welcome to General Chandrasekhar, who was the Vice Chief of the Army during the Kargil years. To the former Chief of the Indian Air Force, Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis. To Sri Shakti Sinha, former Private Secretary to Prime Minister Vajpayee, who's now the Director of the Nehru Memorial Museum. And he's also our host today, so thank you, sir. And of course to Dr. Ravi K. Mishra, who's the Deputy Director of NMML. And our wonderful author, Admiral Sushil Kumar, who was the head of the Indian Navy during those years. Welcome to all of you, sirs. Can we have a big round of applause for them? Our heartfelt welcome to all of you, our friends in the audience today, and to the inspirational Navy band that we've been hearing earlier this evening. We now move on to the more formal part of this evening's program. Dr. Ravi K. Mishra is a scholar of modern Indian as well as world history, contemporary international politics, and world economy. He received his PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University and attended the University of Ottawa as a doctoral fellow during the course of his research. Until recently, he taught history at the Jindal Global Law School in Sonipat. Currently, he is the Deputy Director of the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library and also a visiting professor of modern Indian history at the Rajasthan Vidyapith in Udaipur. He is on the board of advisors of the South Asia Democratic Forum based in Brussels, Belgium. His research interests include the economic history of India, the history of India-China relations, political visions of Hinduism in modern India, literature and society, Islam in Indian history, and in general, revivalistic movements in modern Indian history. Sir, may I now invite you to deliver the formal welcome address. Dr. Ravi K. Mishra.
Thank you. It gives me immense pleasure indeed to welcome you all this evening to the launch of the book, A Prime Minister to Remember, Memories of a Military Chief by Admiral Sushil Kumar. Well, the book focuses on a very, very important era of our contemporary history, and it has been written by somebody who was an insider, who was in the know of things, who was at the helm of affairs. So from that point of view, the book is important not only for those who write about contemporary issues, policy issues, India's defense, etc., but I believe that for future, for historians also, it will be a very important book. So I welcome you all, and we have a very distinguished panel today. We have, of course, the author of the book, Admiral Sushil Kumar. We welcome him. We also have Shri KPR Nair, founder and MD, Konark Publishers Pvt. Limited. We welcome him to this program. We have Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis, former Chief of Indian Air Force. We have General Chandrasekhar, Vice Chief of Army Staff 1997 to 2000. We welcome him to the program. And we have Shri Manoj Joshi, eminent journalist and author, we welcome him to the program. And vote of thanks is to be given by Ms. Lakshmi Bhatia. We welcome her also to this program. And without further delay now, I would hand it over to Lakshmi.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to add our appreciation with some flowers. May I call upon Mrs. Lata Nair? Mrs. Lata Nair from Konark Publishers. To hand over a token of our appreciation to General Chandrasekhar. Thank you, ma'am. May I call upon Mr. Nair to do the honors for Air Chief Marshal Tipnis? And before you sit, sir, also to the author, Admiral Sushil Kumar. Can I call upon Jisa Joy, who is the coordinating editor for Konark Publishers, to felicitate Shri Manoj Joshi? Can I call upon Subroto Roy, who is the General Manager for Konark, to felicitate Shri Shakti Sinha? Samirji, can I ask you to step in for Subroto Roy and do the honors? ये बहुत जरूरी होता है. And Lakshmi, who is a research associate from Konark, to do the honors for Dr. Mishra. Thank you so much. May the fragrance of these lilies add to the energy this evening. I now call upon the founder and managing director of Konark Publishers, Sri K.P.R. Nair, to address us.
Good evening to one and all. The launch of a book reminiscing one of the illustrious Prime Ministers of India, Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, is a momentous occasion for me as a publisher. I am honored that three of the most decorated officers of the Indian Defence, who are served with the Prime Minister Vajpayee, have come together to release the book, A Prime Minister to Remember. Let me, at the offset, congratulate Admiral Sushil Kumar for coming out with a commendable work and gifting to people a side of Vajpayee ji that has till now remained unknown. I would like to thank General Chandrasekhar ji and Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis for the support and encouragement they have given in releasing the book. This is indeed a fitting tribute to a man who led our country with the grit, determination and vision. It was during a chance meeting with Admiral Sushil Kumar ji in the third week of August 2018 that the idea of a book like this took place. A cup of tea at the IIC marked the start of a memorable journey which has resulted in this remarkable work which is before you all today. During the making of this book, my love, respect and admiration for Vajpayee ji have grown manifold. The book is an honest account of a leader who never shied away from taking decisions and leading India from the front. Hence, I wish to recall two incidents with Vajpayee ji that I had left a lasting impression on me. I was ready with a very important book on Pakistan, Anatomy of a Flawed Inheritance, Indo-Pak Relation, 1970-1994, by former Foreign Secretary J.N. Dixit, who later became India's national security advisor, as you all know. We went to invite Vajpayee to release the book and enlighten us on Indo-Pakistan relations. With his trademark mischievous smile, he suggested that Advani Sahab will be a better choice to release the book. It took a considerable time for me and my author to convince Vajpayee ji to accept our invitation. Finally, he agreed, and the book was launched in this very hall in a glittering function. The modesty and humility he showed that day has always awed me. The second instance is when I was determined to publish a book on Dr. Abdul Kalam when he was the president. I was very clear from the beginning that Konark should create a kind of a record in publishing with this unique book, Who is Kalam, by R. Ramanathan, his financial advisor for 16 years, a book of a sitting president being released by a sitting prime minister, and that too in a dozen language editions simultaneously, which will again be released by the prime minister. When I pitched my idea to Vajpayee ji, he immediately agreed, and the book entered the Limca Book of Records. I tried my level best to get it Guinness Book of Records, but they refused to accept my claim. I'm still on it. Let us see. He was a prime minister who was accessible and encouraged everyone to give their best. It was not just the security forces he motivated, but his vision had powered an entire nation during some of the most trying times. I would like to thank Sri Shakti Sinha for agreeing to speak on this occasion. He is among those handful of people in this room who has had the good fortune of knowing Vajpayee ji at a personal as well as professional level. He will be able to give us more insights into the persona of the great leader. Next, I would like to acknowledge Sri Manoj Joshi, who is an authority on Indian politics and Indo-Pakistan relations and much more. There is no better person to throw light on the Vajpayee years than him, as he has closely observed and analyzed all the developments that have taken place during that period. I urge each and every one of you present here to grab a copy of the book to understand the contributions of Sri Vajpayee ji to the growth of this nation. The youth will particularly find this an inspiring read as it dwells on the leadership qualities and the human side of a man who the nation will forever remember with love and respect. I hope this book will enrich all of you in one way or the other. Thank you.
Before we move on, may I request all our dignitaries to light the lamp and move the process forward. Thank you. Admiral Sushil Kumar assumed charge of the Indian Navy as the 16th Chief of Naval Staff on 30th December 1998. A specialist in hydrography and amphibious warfare, he is also a qualified air warfare instructor. He participated in the 1961 invasion of Goa and in both the Indo-Pakistan wars of liberation of Goa. Well, there you go. This is what happens when you look at Wikipedia. Liberation of Goa. And in both the Indo-Pakistan wars of 1965 and 1971. As Director of Naval Operations, he was decorated with the Uttam Yudh Seva Medal for his exceptional conduct in Operation Pavan and in Operation Cactus, which was the liberation of Maldives. He was awarded the Nausena Medal for gallantry while in command of INS Ghorpad. He is an alumnus of the National Defence College and was an instructor at the Defence Services Staff College in Wellington. His training abroad includes a deputation to the Royal Navy on board HMS Dampier and a course in amphibious warfare with the U.S. Navy in California in 1976. Admiral Kumar has held operational commands and important posts such as the Vice Chief of Naval Staff, the Flag Officer Maharashtra area, the Commander of the Flotilla in Mumbai, and Fortress Commander Andaman and Nicobar Islands. He was the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Southern Naval Command in Kochi before being appointed as the Chief of Naval Staff. During his tenure as the Chief of Naval Staff, he was the highest decorated serving officer in the Indian Navy. He is a keen yachtsman and has played polo on the international circuit, for which he has an international rating of 4+ goals. I now invite our esteemed author to tell us more about the book, A Prime Minister to Remember, Memories of a Military Chief. Admiral Sushil Kumar.
Frankly, I never thought it was going to be such a serious affair. When Mr. Nair, the publisher, said, we will launch your book, don't worry, and everything is tickety-boo. But now, this has become like a sword of Damocles. Yes, this is the 20th anniversary of Kargil. And that was, in my opinion, and I'm sure Tippy was with me, Chandu, Vajpayee's finest star. That was his finest star. So it's very appropriate that we are time this launch for the end of June. That was the time when the invaders from across the border were driven back. And it was Prime Minister Vajpayee who turned a strategic, tactical loss into a massive victory for us. Many folks who asked me, how did you select this topic? For a military man to write about a prime minister is not a joke, let me tell you that. Mine is not a biography. It doesn't boast of it. I am not an expert on political acumen and statecraft. For that you need people like Manoj Joshi, Shakti Sinha to comment on it. If you happen to lay your hands on the book, you will notice there's a photograph here on the front page. It is of Prime Minister Vajpayee looking very deeply inward, in deep thought, listening intently to me as I'm escorting him. We had just returned from a combat demonstration of the Navy at sea. 3 days he spent with us on board our aircraft carrier, and we showed him the complete three-dimensional capability of our fleet. He was most impressed. He said, हमें पता भी नहीं था कि हमारी नौसेना इतनी तगड़ी है. He's listening to me intently here as I'm escorting him back because he asked me a question. What is it that makes the armed forces different? What is it that motivates the military? It's a long explanation. For that, I'm afraid you will have to read my book. Walking behind him is a smart-looking individual, and he happens to be here on the stage. Shakti Sinha. He was his personal private secretary. He knew more than anybody else about Vajpayee. It was Prime Minister Vajpayee's personal touch. People like Tippy and I know it. This was in the spring of 1999. Shortly thereafter, Kargil erupted. The moment it erupted, he told Shakti Sinha, मैं हमारे तीनों chief से मिलूंगा. I want to know more about military ethos. What is it about military ethos that is different? He understood. He had an earnest desire. But that was not all. We met him regularly. Never what tactics or strategy discussed. It was only military ethos. What our frontline troops do. He wanted to understand the military. And in that, he also understood what India is all about. He could have taught persons like Kautilya and Sun Tzu, maestros on the art of statescraft and the war. He could have taught them a thing of truth. That was his understanding. Today, as I'm standing here, I remember those good old days when we used to meet him at his residence. General Ved Malik, Tipnis, myself. He was a listener. He listened, unassuming. In fact, when I think back at the Kargil War, which is where he showed his mettle, he gave the full credit to the armed forces. But it was his master stroke, which both Tippy and Chandu will remember. Don't cross the line of control. Lekin unko bhaga do. But how do you do that without crossing the line of control? It was a master stroke. When two adversaries who are nuclear armed are facing each other, he knew the value of restraint. And the world acclaimed him for that. But he knew India better than most of us. That was my personal impression. He knew the complexity, the mind-boggling diversity of this country. He ran a coalition government with 23 disparate coalition partners. But he was a good shepherd. He knew how to keep the flock together. He was the perfect good shepherd. he understood what India is today. I think this is much too serious an issue, so I better tell you a small narrative which will be in a lighter vein. When I was a young lad, many, many years ago, I left the National Defense Academy, where all of us have been trained, as a young teenager, and we came to Bombay. Some of my batchmates, and they're sitting here, we were on INS Tir. And we had gone to see a movie ashore. It was a hilarious comedy starring Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers was playing the role of an Indian doctor. And he was a struggling Indian doctor in England with a hole-in-the-wall clinic by the riverside in London. And his patient was none other than that Italian bombshell and voluptuous Sophia Loren. And Sophia Loren, I recall that film, came to him and tells him, "Doctor, I'm in trouble. My heart is beating boom-a-dee-boom." Peter Sellers, through his double convex lenses, looking at this awesome ramparts facing him, puts on his stethoscope, and as he approaches, mesmerized by this voluptuous Sophia Loren, he turns and sings that famous lyric, which became a Grammy Award winner. From New Delhi to Darjeeling, I have done my share of healing, but goodness gracious me. That, ladies and gentlemen, is all I need to say about Vajpayee's understanding. And I'm sure it was not what Peter Sellers had in his mind or some of our male friends here are thinking about, but this play, written by George Bernard Shaw, meant to indicate the humongous complexity of India, which only Vajpayee understood. Now to brass tacks. And to thank particularly the publisher, Mr. Nair, for graciously accepting this responsibility. Behind the scenes, he runs a spirited, motivated team. I don't know whether some of them are here. There was this lady, Dipali Singh, the manuscript editor. What talent, probing my mind, and because, military writing is something different. And she asking me, "What exactly do you mean, Admiral?" All on Twitter or WhatsApp or this or that. There was this designer, Misha Oberoi, creatively brilliant. And there was this young coordinating editor, Jiza Joy, sitting somewhere here, who made me age about 20 years. Every time I got a WhatsApp message from her, my heart would sink. And she would ring me up and say, "Now, Admiral, don't get hassled." Now, she's fit enough to be my granddaughter. Don't get hassled. All you do is touch this, double click here, go to that, download this, press that, do this. I said, "Jiza, my head is reeling." But what application, dexterity. Mr. Nair, I admire your team, and I must thank you for it. last but not least, there's a lady sitting in this audience. And if it was not for her, I don't think I would have ever been able to complete this task. Thank God that sometimes we have a patient wife also. And I'm very thankful that she had a master's degree in English literature, because painstakingly she would sit there and correct this and that. One day she turned to me, Sushil, tell me, are you issuing operation orders to your ships and fleets, or are you writing a book? I think it's a great advantage having a soulmate whom you can bounce an idea off 24/7, but I can also tell you, terrible for one's ego. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. It was Winston Churchill who famously said that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton and Harrow. And it was a similar sort of camaraderie between the three service chiefs, General Ved Malik, Air Chief Marshal Tipnis, and Admiral Sushil Kumar, that led to the successful conclusion of the Kargil conflict. It is little known that as teenagers, they all trained together as young cadets at the Tri-Services National Defense Academy. This includes General Chandrasekhar, who is with us today in lieu of General Malik. And I might add that General Ved Malik, Admiral Sushil, and even General Chandrasekhar were all billeted together as cadets in the same squadron barracks at the NDA more than 6 decades ago. What a coincidence and what an incredible journey together. The light-hearted sporting rivalry between them goes back to their boot camp days at their alma mater. Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis of the Air Force proved to be a far better sailor and yachtsman, while his naval buddy, Admiral Sushil Kumar, earned his spurs on the polo field. After joining their allotted service, the three of them served together in various tri-service operational assignments and then landed up together as the vice chiefs of their respective services. And finally, they came together again as military chiefs of the Army, Air Force, and Navy, and served with Prime Minister Vajpayee during the Kargil War of 1999. And here we have them again today, 20 years later. Another round of applause. These are very, very special journeys. So General Chandrasekhar, who was the vice chief of the army during the Kargil War, was, as you now know, batchmate of Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis. He was commissioned into the 4th Gorkha Rifles, and being a paratrooper, he had the rare distinction of commanding the para brigade of the Army Special Forces. During his 4 decades of active duty, he has been decorated twice by the President of India. It gives me great honor to invite General Chandrasekhar to now address us. Sir.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a privilege for me to be invited for this function this evening, and for which I would like to thank Admiral Sushil Kumar, the author of the book, and Mr. Nair, the publisher. Of course, I was not scheduled to be here originally. It should have been General Ved Malik, but being a vice chief, it is always my duty to stand for the chief. Some of you might recall in initial stages of the Kargil war, again I was officiating as a chief till he returned from his tour abroad. So it's something which is not very uncommon with me. Right, Kargil war, as you're all aware, was fought 2 decades ago in the mountains, high altitude area and rugged terrain of the Ladakh. And of course, since much has been written on Kargil and much has been read, I shall not dwell on it except focus a few points which are relevant to the book for your attention. Now, Kargil, of course, happened shortly after Prime Minister Vajpayee's visit to Lahore, and after the Lahore Declaration was signed. It was perceived that the tensions between the two countries have been de-escalated, and also the geopolitical environment has improved. However, we found in early May, Pakistan has stealthily occupied the traditionally large gaps in Kargil area. So therefore, in this environment, circumstances, it was really an act of treachery by Pakistan. Of course, it is not very, it's very common with Pakistan, as you know, as recent as that, whether it is Pulwama, Uri or Pathankot, it seems to be the normal way of dealing with Pakistan. Now, why did this Pakistanis select Kargil area for this treachery? The reason, of course, as you know, Kargil heights control our national highway, the lifeline from Srinagar, Dras, Kargil, Batalik to Leh. So therefore, it is very important for sustenance and maintenance of our troops in entire Ladakh region. And also, they carefully selected this area because traditionally, since 1947, entire Kargil area has been held by just one infantry brigade over a frontage of 160 kilometers. And right from 47, 65, 71, there has been no reinforcement, as it was felt that it was well demarcated and understood. However, this happened, and of course, when this happened, we were surprised, as you all know. We were totally surprised. And the reasons for surprise are also well known to you. Very briefly, of course, the wide gaps, we were infrequently patrolled. We didn't have the satellite imagery or the sensors, and many other factors. And even the small or whatever indicators were received were not well read by the Army and also other intelligence agencies. So therefore, the nation was surprised and dismayed. Now, it took us some time to get the totality of the picture of the entire thing. And having done that, when by the middle of May, the situation became clear, and at the CCS meeting first on the 18th of May, I recall, when the plans were presented, there were a few directions which were given. Initial direction, of course, they were subsequently further modified on 22nd, 25th May, till the operational plans got ready. And therein, there are two major directions. First, of course, that all the lodgements will be evicted fully, but without extending the operations beyond Kargil or crossing the line of control. Now that, of course, was because of the strategic restraint and also perhaps the nuclear dimension played into it. However, it was, of course, tactically disadvantageous for us because it narrowed down our options. And of course, thereafter, we are also directed that all preparations be carried out and balance be maintained all over the country as far as borders go. And having got there, the Army also evolved its own plans, and basically again in 3 steps. First step was to locate and contain the lodgement so that the road access is not interfered or interdicted. Having done that, build up the resources of troops, fire support, engineer units, logistic infrastructure, and then gather intelligence and prepare for attack of these heights which have been occupied. And of course, as you know, in mountains, the effect of artillery fire or even the air is not as effective because of the nature of the terrain. And of course, subsequently, the airburst ammunition or the PGMs by the Air Force did make considerable contribution to the successful capture or recapture of these objectives. Of course, the Army made sure that because of the domination from these heights, we resort to night attacks or attack by infiltration. But despite that, sheer gallantry of our soldiers and officers who led these assaults, resulting in total 527 bravehearts who lost their lives and almost 1,363 wounded in action. So therefore, at the end of the day, we were able to recapture all the heights. It took us almost 2 months of sustained operations. We were all fully aware of it. And of course, finally to conclude, I'd like to say that the Kargil operation demonstrated Indian national resolve to fight back for whatever is rightfully ours. And to that extent, we succeeded in all respects. It also brought out the close cooperation and the synergy between the 3 services, the government, civilian, other civilian agencies, and of course, the active diplomacy by the MEA, and also proactive part by the media, all acted as force multipliers, and we were able to achieve. And of course, it all happened under the stewardship of Prime Minister Vajpayee, who made sure that full freedom of action was given to the services once the area or the directions or the objectives were identified. That's all, and I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir. Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis served as the Chief of the Air Staff of the Indian Air Force from December 1998 to December 2001. He commanded the Air Force to distinction during the Kargil War. After his schooling, he joined the National Defense Academy in January 1956. He was commissioned as a fighter pilot in 1960. He spent his initial years as an operational pilot in several frontline fighter squadrons. During the Indo-Pak War of 1965, Flight Lieutenant Tipnis served with the 1st Supersonics, the 28th Squadron. After the war, he was deputed to Iraq as a pilot attack instructor. As an Air Marshal, he served as Senior Air Staff Officer of the Eastern Air Command and of the Western Air Command. He later served as the Air Office Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Air Command from August 95 to March 97. He then moved to Air Headquarters and served as the Vice Chief of the Air Staff before taking over as the 18th Chief of the Air Staff in 1998. May I now request Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis to address us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Admiral Sushil Kumar has been congratulated by the speakers before me for having undertaken this stupendous task to write about a Prime Minister who is certainly worth remembering. But I'd like to point out that probably Admiral Sushil Kumar has set some sort of a first in the history of military leaders. In that, as far as I know, and I did a little bit of research, I'm not particularly good at it, but I think he is the only military chief to write about a prime minister under whom he served. Perhaps the publishers could do some more research, or there are many historians here who would set me right. But I do believe that this was a first. I believe that this is an outstanding initiative by Admiral Sushil Kumar for the reason I will talk about the Prime Minister Vajpayee's leadership during Kargil, but I want to talk about the present state of the Indian institutions, how we seem to be at loggerheads with each other. The executive, the parliament, the judiciary, the press, you name it. And the dialogues that take place between us are high decibels, uncouth, I'm not mincing any words, there is little civility. And when you recall the prime ministership of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, this is what stands out. Always urbane, civil, pleasant, respectful. Many may have thought that he was weak. He left others to do his work for him. And I have to admit that that was my first impression when I interacted with him. But within no time, I realized that Atal Bihari Vajpayee was of a different caliber altogether. Again, I'm no historian, but I would like to recall on this occasion that when Prime Minister Vajpayee took over the reins of Prime Ministership, this was his second tenure as the Prime Minister, having been the Prime Minister for not even a fortnight, a day short of it. And he came back to power in a coalition, as somebody has already mentioned, something like 23 different parties. His position within the country and outside, in my understanding, couldn't have been weaker than it was at the time that he took reins of India's governance. I think no Prime Minister could have been more ill-equipped to face a war that fell right into his lap soon after he'd taken over. And it is his master statesmanship, his personal qualities of influencing others, of galvanizing people into do their jobs, that won the day. Without going into too many details, once again I'll recall that the Indian Army was finding it difficult, and actually given the terrain that it is in that area, to oust the intruders from the heights that they have occupied. And they wanted the Air Force to step in. I would leave the exchanges that took place between the Army and the Air Force. But when the government was approached for allowing the Air Force to start operations in support of the Army, there were a couple of meetings of the Cabinet Committee on Security, which denied them this request. And the reasons given were straightforward. The government realized that introducing air power into any conflict between India and Pakistan, two countries who were always bickering, who had been at war times before, declared as well as undeclared. Skirmishes were taking place all the time. And except for 47, 65, and 71, the Air Force had not been brought in. And the visibility, the optics of air power coming to the fray gives an entirely different tenor to conflicts between two countries. I know that the army was finding it more and more difficult. And when we met on the 25th of May, if I am not mistaken, for that final meeting, General Ved Malik had once again pleaded that the air power be brought in. Prime Minister Vajpayee generally never spoke at these meetings. Mostly it was Brijesh Mishra or Minister for External Affairs. The Defense Minister himself was rarely, if I may say, perhaps never heard at the CCS meetings. And the Prime Minister, this is the first time that I think I heard the Prime Minister, if my memory serves me right, asked the Army Chief, "Kya ye ho nahi sakta hai without the Air Force?" And I stepped in before Ved Malik could respond. And I said, "Sir, the Army needs air support and we are ready. We can start operations tomorrow morning. But if necessary, it can be done within the next 6 hours." The Prime Minister was pensive for a few moments. And then he looked up and said, "ठीक है, कल सुबह से शुरुआत कीजिएगा." Now, I had served in J&K right from the time that I was a flying officer. General Chandrasekhar, who comes from the Gurkhas, I don't think I've shared this little bit of information with him. But I served as a flying officer with 70 Brigade at a place called Chumatang. And I was attached to 70 Brigade. But instead of boarding and lodging with the brigade headquarters, one of the battalions had adopted us, and that was 9 Dogras. But the other battalion, 3rd Fort Gurkhas, they were entrusted to do some patrolling in that area to find which of the passes which are negotiable. And with the brashness of a young flying officer, without really realizing what I was getting myself into, I volunteered to accompany this patrol. It was a 7-day patrol, and the minimum altitude was 11,000 feet. And I ventured in my flying boots. And lo and behold, on the very second day of my patrol, the sole of my flying boots had started coming off. Fortunately, I had 6 handkerchiefs with me, and they were used as bandages for my boots. The idea of telling you this is that I know that area. I had also been acting as the forward air controller for some of the training missions that were done by hunters ex-Ambala. And I had realized that time how very difficult it is to spot targets on the ground, especially if there are no markers, barren, bereft of any vegetation, no certainly landmarks that you could refer to, give reference to. On the other hand, if you're on the ground, you could see an aircraft as soon as you heard it. A thing which is just not possible. Because there the visibility is something 20, 25, 30 kilometers. And sometimes I used to say you can see even tomorrow. Whereas in the plains, we are very fortunate even if you can see 4 kilometers. And therefore to spot targets here is very difficult. Then I was AOC GNK. I had toured the entire area both by ground and by air. And of course the army is to refer to Air Force starred officers as tie wale general. Because you know our uniform had the tie. And they didn't, of course, they were not savvy with the Air Force rank. So all that we referred to was tie wale general aa rahe hain. And when they heard that somebody is coming by land and accompanied by his wife, they were said there is something wrong or there is something totally, totally out of phase. But the idea is to tell you this, that I know that area. I know exactly what the lie of the land is, right from Dras to Kargil to Batalik. And I knew when, the reason I'm giving you this background is, when air power was required, now let me tell you that a lot of time had elapsed between the time that the ground operation had started and before air power came in. First, we had taken all precautionary measures to ensure, should escalation take place, the Air Force was ready. You may recall in 65, when the army was hard put to stop the armor, Pakistani armor, trying to cut off the Pathankot Jammu highway at somewhere near Samba. The Air Force had been called in. The Air Force came in, but we had not taken the precautions that were necessary. We had not alerted our bases, we had not taken the air defense precautions. And the Pakistan Air Force retaliated and found us not ready. We lost several aircraft on the ground. We didn't want this to repeat itself. So we are ready. And that's why I was able to tell the Prime Minister, 6 hours is good enough. Not only were our forces, not our forces, but all our stores, equipment, air defense missiles, air defense radars, all in position except the fighters. We had sent some earlier ones for air defense, but the main force that took part in Kargil operations did not move until the green light had been given on the 25th of May. Now, I also knew that to be able to carry out operations in Kargil, in that area, when I talk about Kargil, I talk about the entire area, it was extraordinarily difficult to maintain the sanctity of the line of control. The line of control generally runs in a west to east direction, more or less parallel to the Srinagar-Galay highway in that area. And the best direction of approach for our attacks would have been north to south or south to north. Direction in which either before the attack or after the attack, we would have, without question, not only crossed the line of control, but gone fairly deep. But I also knew that there would be, it was my assessment that the government would not be quite willing to give the green light for crossing the line of control. And I knew that if necessary, we could, with restrictions which were certainly hard on us, but not debilitating. We could certainly have done the task, but not as well as we could have had we had freedom of action. Yet, I made bold to ask the Prime Minister, "Sir, may I have your permission to cross the line of control?" Perhaps I have gone into rather great detail, but it is to make you understand that at that time, when I asked for permission to cross the line of control, the Prime Minister, in a voice firmer than I ever heard, "No, हम line of control cross नहीं करेंगे." Having had that earlier assessment done, not only it's not a personal assessment, but it was a joint assessment with my commanders, which we had gone over many times over, and we knew that if push comes to shove, we will be able to restrict ourselves to our side of the line of control. And therefore, I was able to tell the Prime Minister, accept the Prime Minister's diktat. But I also know, and I think this particular belief of mine was strengthened with the 3 years that I spent as an Air Force chief under Prime Minister Vajpayee. I knew that if the Air Force had not been able to follow that diktat, and if I had explained to the Prime Minister why we needed a line of control, I have no doubt, perhaps Shakti here would comment more on it, that he would have, with due thought, due discussion, given the green light if it was necessary. I've gone into this great depth because because earlier on when he used to sit there quietly, I used to wonder, is the Prime Minister listening? Or is he just leaving it to Minister Jaswant Singh and the National Security Advisor, Brijesh Mishra? But I knew that when he spoke as he did at that time, he was the man in charge. You'll also recall, tell me who is the master of ceremonies if I'm taking too much time and I need to cut short. I have probably gone well beyond my time. But we are talking about the Prime Minister, and maybe some of these anecdotes may not be in that book. And I particularly want to talk in terms of how important it is, this relationship between the service chiefs and the Prime Minister. Although the Prime Minister is not accessible to not accessible to us, but is not approached by the three chiefs on a regular basis, that avenue is available to the chief if he thinks he is not getting the response that he wants from the government. And if necessary, because otherwise the interactions are all with the Raksha Mantri. There were 2 or 3 incidents in which, not with one was with the Raksha Mantri, one was with the National Security Advisor, and one was with another minister, where I had differences of opinion, and I stood my ground. I knew in my mind that if necessary, and I don't get the relief, I don't get the answers that I want, I shall approach the Prime Minister. But I think the Prime Minister, once again I'm telling you this, that he had given full authority to the ministers. So important it is that the ministers know they are the bosses in what they deal with. And therefore, when the persons concerned knew that I was holding my ground, I think the relief came without the matter having to go to the Prime Minister. In the third instance, a minister wanted to meet me, and the minister asked whether the meeting should be at his office or at the minister's office or at my office. And I told the minister, well, if the minister wants to meet me, I would be delighted to welcome him to Vai Bhavan. And the reason for the minister to come here was to stop the Air Force from, now I'm quoting, killing animals. And I had to tell the minister, I need to explain to you why animals are killed on airfields, because they are a hazard to aviation. And the minister very arrogantly said, train your pilots to be better and avoid the animals. And I certainly lost my cool. And I said, Minister, nobody speak to the Chief of the Air Staff in that tone or those words. If you don't want to explain, if you don't want my explanation, there's nothing further for us to discuss. And the minister walked out. I, of course, informed the Raksha Mantri. I don't know whether the minister informed the Prime Minister or not, but I do believe the word must have gone to him. I heard nothing more. The Raksha Mantri told me not to worry. The last thing I want to tell you is this. This is about Prime Minister Vajpayee, and that is why I am emphasizing these issues. To know what a great service Admiral Sushil Kumar has done in writing about Prime Minister Vajpayee. And the last instance I want to tell you. When Musharraf came to India, not as General Musharraf, but as the head of the government of Pakistan, we treated him like a VIP. The press went gaga over him. The Indian people went gaga over him. And when the reception party was there at Rashtrapati Bhavan, the custom is that one of the three chiefs stands in the receiving line. After the Prime Minister, the Cabinet Secretary, then the chief whoever is there. And for whatever the reasons, that's not point to explain, I chose not to salute Musharraf. The press made a big thing out of it. I realized at that time, even before I had allowed this omission to take part on my part, that probably the Prime Minister will not be too happy about it because of the initiatives they have taken in getting these two countries together. But soon after, a day or two later, when the Prime Minister came across, we were all waiting to receive him. And he approached me and said, "Suna hai, aapne Musharraf sahab ko salute nahi kiya." And I said, "Yes, sir." And I wanted to explain the circumstances, that it was not a childish urge on my part, but certainly something which I had considered it was necessary at that moment. I knew from his face that he wanted to say something more, or would like to upbraid me, but he didn't. But that look was good enough to say, I wish you hadn't. He was a great Prime Minister, and Sushil, you have done a great, great service, not only remembering the Prime Minister, but to this country in emphasizing, I'm sure you have done that in your book, how important it is that the institutions in this country function as they ought to, as per the example set by Prime Minister Vajpayee. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Very, very important points. May I now request General Chandrasekhar and Air Chief Marshal Tipnis to release the book, A Prime Minister to Remember, Memories of a Military Chief by Admiral Sushil Kumar, and to present the first copy to the author himself. Can we have another round of applause with a little bit more energy? Thank you so much. Thank you again, sirs. Our next speaker today is Dr. Manoj Joshi, who is a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. He is a journalist who has specialized in foreign and security policy. In the years he has worked with the Times of India, the Hindu, the Hindustan Times, and the India Today group. He is a regular columnist and commentator in the Indian media. In 2011, he was appointed by the Government of India to the Task Force on National Security, chaired by Mr. Naresh Chandra, to propose reforms in the national security system of the country. He has been a member of India's National Security Advisory Board and has authored 2 books on Kashmir, as well as several papers and chapters in scholarly works on South and Southeast Asia. He is a PhD from the School of International Studies, JNU, and has held visiting appointments in several universities. He is a regular speaker at defense institutions in India, as well as think tanks in India and abroad. We invite you, sir, to address us.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here in this auditorium and with this audience and this book, of course. Now, apart from his distinguished military career, very little is known of Admiral Sushil Kumar's personal side. I got to know some of it when he became the Navy Chief in December 1998. I wrote an editorial for India Today magazine called An Officer and Gentleman. And of course, with very characteristic generosity, he became chief under certain circumstances, some difficult circumstances. But the soft-spoken gentleman who is from the Nagarkoil district of Tamil Nadu has never spoken about his differences with Admiral Vishnu Bhagwat. In fact, he was very generous and in his conversation subsequently. He himself had an extremely distinguished career, meaning Admiral Sushil Kumar is evident from the fact that he was decorated with an Uttam Yudh Seva Medal for his services as the Director Naval Operations in Op Pavan and Op Cactus. These were two signature operations that took place. That Op Pavan relates to Sri Lanka and Op Cactus was the Maldives operation. He's also got a Navy medal for gallantry during command of the INS Ghorpad. Not many of us know that the Admiral's father was from Kerala, who returned from abroad after his postgraduate education in Oxford and married a young Rajput girl from a Rajput Khandan. And so if you are intrigued by the fact that the Admiral is very well known within the service and for his love for yachtsmanship and for polo, horse riding. In fact, when I used to visit Navy House, it had this lovely golden retrievers, huge big golden retrievers. So he is very well known for that, for his equestrian activities. And I think there's some pictures in the book as well. So you know where the genes come from. There's the Rajput connection there as well. Now, of course, coming to the Vajpayee period, when you look at that whole period, you learn enormous lessons about how a great leader, how a great statesman makes policy. Because we look at it in retrospect, and then we see, take two examples, take China and Pakistan. I mean, say, the seeds of the policy were laid in Vajpayeeji's mind when he was a parliamentarian in the 60s. So it begins from the 60s, then he becomes EAM, External Affairs Minister, between 77 and 79. And what does he do? He's the first person who breaks ice with Pakistan, because after the 71 Bangladesh war, relations with Pakistan had frozen. In 79, in 77 or 78, Vajpayee becomes the first person to break ice with Pakistan and start normalizing ties again. The same thing with China. After the 62 war, there had been virtually no connection with this thing. So here, Vajpayee goes to China. Now, this is extremely important because then we are now talking 77, 79, and then you go all the way to the late 90s when he becomes prime minister. The thought process is very much there because there is a certain determination. I am going to make a breakthrough. That this we cannot continue, and this has been the strategic dilemma for this country, that our diplomacy, our security policy has not been able to break the China-Pakistan nexus. It's a failure of a huge magnitude. I mean, they're staring at you in the face. Here's China, here's Pakistan. They are allies. What should our effort be? To break them, to break that nexus. And we have been unable to do it. But Vajpayee had that determination. And what does he do? Let's take with Pakistan. Goes to Lahore. He's betrayed in Kargil. So February 99 he goes, and as we know now in retrospect, the Pakistanis were already taking up positions in Kargil. He executes the Kargil war, and I think people have spoken a lot about the Kargil operation, which was the master stroke was no crossing the LOC. Why was it a master stroke? Two reasons. One is that it did not cross any nuclear red lines. It was very important. And the second is that it outflanked Pakistan completely on the diplomatic front. Since then, the concept of the sanctity of the LOC has come to take shape. Meaning most countries in the world today more or less, accept that there's a sanctity of the LOC, mind you, which is only a line of control. So that was Vajpayee's achievement in Kargil. But then, so he goes to Lahore, betrayed in Kargil. Then what does he do? In 2001, July, Agra summit. Invites Musharraf over. So he doesn't let time, kind of stand still. He moves immediately. Agra summit. Agra summit fails. Then we had a period, then comes the Pakistani attack. Now this is the counter-attack, I would say, from the deep state in Pakistan. The attack on parliament in December. So July was the Agra summit. December is the attack on parliament. And so then comes Operation Parakram. The whole year, 2003, was basically Parakram. But diplomacy was working. And what happens? 2003, November, Musharraf declares ceasefire along the line of control. It's a ceasefire which actually has broadly held even till date. And if anyone looks at statistics as to how many people, the kind of bombardment that used to take place, all the military people know what was happening and how many people got killed in that place. And plus it was more important, that bombardment of the line of control was the means of infiltration. Since that 2003 November ceasefire, infiltration figures have gone down. And you can check any of the statistics. Those figures even to date, meaning I'm talking about 2019, they're still lower than what they were prior to that. So that's November 2003. Then comes January 2004. The SAARC summit in Islamabad, where Vajpayee, Musharraf talk. They say, Vajpayee tells him, okay, you want to talk Kashmir? We'll talk Kashmir. But you do something about terrorism. And so that begins the process, because thereafter what happens is, the Vajpayee government lost majority, but as you well know, the subsequent government maintained the continuity, and we came the closest to actually coming up with a solution in Kashmir with Pakistan. And that's an extremely important thing, because no matter what anyone tells you, Pakistan, the solution to Kashmir has two components. One component is domestic and one is external, which is Pakistan. Both have to synchronize. If they don't synchronize, you're not going to solve, that problem is not going to be resolved. And so Vajpayee ji took up to January 2004 and moved there. What happens with China? Number one, Pokhran test. As the famous leaked letter pointed out, the context of the tests was Chinese power. What is happening in China, that is the important context as to why. But there is also Vajpayee's own belief that India should be a nuclear weapon state. He had a firm belief on that. In 1996, when he formed a government for just 13 days, the first thing he did was to give instructions to carry out, to begin the test, the nuclear test. The shafts were cleaned out, people moved in, devices were emplaced. Mr. Santhanam was sitting inside one of those tunnels, and suddenly the message comes from Delhi that the government has fallen. And so the test was cancelled in 96. So what happens in 98? The moment he comes to power, the first thing he does is, please move ahead on that. And so we become a nuclear state. Now the nuclear thing is extremely important because the nuclear issue was the pill stuck in the throat of the Indo-US relationship. Because of the nuclear issue, we were the most embargoed country in the world as far as the US is concerned. And it took the nuclear tests to wash it down. Once the tests were over, as you well know, the US came out down tough, they imposed sanctions, etc., etc. But within 2 years, you know very well, that the whole thing changed. Just one thing, Strobe-Talbot dialogue, and that is the basis on which the Indo-American relationship that you see today. I think it is Vajpayee ji who called it a natural, called us natural allies, is based on that. And then you look at China. As I said, Pokhran was the context of China. But then it's Vajpayee who goes in 2003 to China. And it's interesting because we were there in the visit together. And because no one was going to China, not for any other reason, but the fact that there was a SARS epidemic had taken place. And Beijing was completely empty, meaning in the hotels, there was not a single person staying anywhere. We landed up. The Chinese were really, what should I say, very grateful that the Indians had landed up. But more important than that were the decisions taken. What was the decision? Decision was that, look, you've been discussing this Sino-Indian border from virtually 1981, you've been discussing, 1983, I think, you've been discussing it, official talks, these talks, that talks, you've been discussing from 83 all the way down to 98, 99. Now we must do something about it. So Vajpayee ji and the Chinese counterpart, immediate decision that we need to kick the discussion to the political level. So we will appoint special representatives, and Vajpayee ji nominated Brajesh Mishra. The Chinese side nominated Dai Bingwo, and they began talks. What's called special representatives. Now, the format still goes on. The 21st round took place the other day. But Vajpayee is not to blame. The thing is that I asked Brajesh Mishra about 3 years after they had retired. I said, sir, my impression in Beijing was that you intended this border thing to be settled very fast. He said, yes. He said, we would have finished it in 3 years. If the government had been re-elected, the Sino-Indian border issue would have been non-existent. So now you can imagine and so what happens then, both the Pakistan part and the Chinese part, the government takes up. Meaning the Manmohan government, and to its credit, I must say, takes up and tries to do something with it. But you know, you don't have this is the point, and this is what is called the what ifs of history. What if Vajpayee had been re-elected in 2004? Which direction would things have gone? But if I have just described to you, what I have described to you is the importance of the leader being very clear in his mind as to where he wants to go. Clarity of vision. And I've described to you that clarity of vision all the way from the time when he first became minister, as External Affairs Minister, in the late 70s, all the way down to his prime ministership. You can see consistency. He didn't get he didn't get foiled by Kargil. He didn't get foiled by the parliament attack. Persisted because he knew where he wanted to go. He had a very clear idea. And I think that is the service that I think Admiral Sushil Kumar has done, that he has focused on that, brought us renewed focus in that period, renewed attention. Chief Marshal Tipnis mentioned that this is probably the first book by a former chief about a prime minister he served. I would say, of course, as a journalist, that Admiral Sushil Kumar has not revealed any real secrets. You see, because that would have been improper on his part. He has not revealed what he has given us is an anecdotal account. Plus, he has focused on the way things were done, how they were done, and I think it's up to scholars and others to therefore pursue. And I think since we are here at the Nehru Memorial Museum, this would be a good pointer to scholars that there is a wealth of stuff out there. Particularly the manner in which the statesman leader like Atal Bihari Vajpayee functioned, and my own association with him goes back to the mid-80s when he was a Rajya Sabha member, and I had we used to often meet in TV studios when he was in the opposition. And I still remember once Doordarshan suddenly invited me for a program. And then when I landed up for the program, they said, you are the anchor of you have to anchor the program. I was completely this thing because it was in Hindi. And here I see Vajpayee sitting in front of me, a person who was a master of Hindi, and I started stuttering and fumbling. And after some time, Vajpayee ji looks at me with a smile. He says, and looks at the Doordarshan guy, he said, देखिए, जोशी जी के बस का नहीं है, वो तो लिंग और काली में फंस जा रहे हैं. But he was a very, as I said, very generous man. And of course, the important thing was to understand his silences. Because it is what he did not say was often more important than what he did say. And those silences were very long, but you could make out, and as I've just described to you, his actions, the actions were very clear. There's absolutely no doubt about it that he was a great man and a great statesman. So I thank you here.
Thank you, Joshi ji, for adding all those amazing insights and nuggets to this. Oh, okay. So I call upon Sri Shakti Sinha, who's the director of the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, to give his special remarks.
Just remarks. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We've had a fascinating evening listening to various points of view. Manoj has raised a lot of conceptual points, but I don't think this is the time to engage into that. But the book actually, and of course, Kargil is very much part of the book, but the chapter of the book on military formations and the changes, the revolution in military matters, how on the India-China border /LOC, we have 7 operational Air Force and Army commands versus 1 integrated Chinese command. How the kind of changes have happened all over the world. The issue, we are still stuck with the Chief of Staff's committee, which goes back to the 40s. I have not been able to move. I'm not blaming anybody for it. I'm merely making the fact that these are also real issues that Admiral Sushma has raised very, very in detail in the book. And I think for those who read the book, they'll find that part also fascinating. One doesn't have to agree with everything, but as long as it provokes us to think. And you are in the center, this Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. For those of you who are new here, you'll come probably for the first time. This is a government body, but we're an autonomous body. We have the Nehru Museum, we have a planetarium, but this building you are in is the hub, the heart. It has a library, which is possibly the best library in contemporary India anywhere in the world. It has a fantastic collection of journals, and I'm praising it even though I'm the director. That's because I've been only here for 3 years. This institution is 55 years old. So people over the generations have contributed to it. We have the best collection of what is called private papers. The letters people write to each other, the diaries they keep, the newspaper cuttings, lots and lots of stuff. So scholars all over the world come here regularly. People like Manoj knows it, but many others would not know it. And so I think this is a good point that we're launching the book here, because the book does give a lot of food for thought. I will not go too much into Kargil. Kargil has been discussed. Except to say I remember, of course, the discussions on the LOC. But the fact that this was for us at least the first televised war, where you could see the Air Force fire its shots at Pakistani bunkers. You could see the jet ski marks of the Pakistani troops, who were not Mujahideen, contrary to what the Pakistanis wanted us to believe. And the angst at losing your people, the angst at the fact that prisoners of war were tortured So there was angst at the same time. But I think the way the military conducted itself, the army definitely, but the Air Force, despite the constraints which Chief Marshal Tipnis has said, but the Navy. Why would the Kargil war involve the Navy? But it did involve. Admiral Sushil Kumar came up with the idea to involve the Navy. And I think the Navy did a fantastic job in literally conveying the message to Pakistan that you are being bottled up. So in that sense, your lifeline of oil and other stuff will stop. And this is the same, if you remember 1971, when the Vikrant had to be marooned, anchored, Port Cornwallis, Diglipur. Go out in the daytime, come back. Because, we have gone from there to a level of confidence in 99. I think a remarkable amount of thinking changes did make a difference. People at the top, the 3 chiefs being together at NDA, and the Vice Chief Army also being, and 3 of them the same squadron, that helps, as Admiral Sushil Kumar tells you, that helped them a lot. I'm sure they had differences also, some of which is public. But the fact that it helped, but institutionally, is that the right way to go about it? Having seen joint commands, semi-joint command in the early 80s, where Admiral Rishiraj Sood was the fortress commander in Andamans. So the time when I left the Andamans the second time, when Admiral D.K. Joshi and then General Marwa were there. Having seen the jointness in operation, I know the advantages and I know the limitations of jointness. So I think we do need to have a very good discussion on this subject. We are in the 21st century. We are finishing the second decade of the 21st century. Our entire government structures, definitely, not just the army, the military, not just the military-civil relationship, but entire structures of government, I think, need to reflect the times, need to be, in fact, ahead of the curve and not behind the curve. So I'm sure that with this book, and Mr. Nair is a very, very old friend, I was telling him that I dislike getting mementos, I like getting books. And for the last 2 decades, especially in the beginning, nowadays the supply has slightly dried up. But he gave me amazing books to read in the 90s and earlier on. So I really enjoy, I still have them. I really enjoy reading these books that you're coming out with. And I'm sure you'll persuade more people, Admiral Sushil Kumar, to come up with a little juicy stuff, but the others also to come up with books like this. Because it is time that people in public services not just express their frustration and anger, which we have, which we're entitled to have, legitimate, but also come up with challenges, bring the full weight of their experience into helping the country navigate the waters ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for, there's a vote of thanks coming up, but as director, let me thank you for coming here and for making this event a very good success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. As we come to an end of this evening's function, I would like to thank all the people who made this evening so special. First and foremost, our deepest gratitude to General Chandrasekhar, Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis, Shri Manoj Joshi, Shri Shakti Sinha, and Shri R.K. Mishra. Thank you, sirs, for your presence, your energy, your stories. To our dearest author, Admiral Sushil Kumar, this is a special book from a special person. Thank you for all your inputs, sir. To our dear friends in the audience, Shri Narendra Jadhav ji, Mrs. Jadhav, thank you for gracing this occasion. To the Konark and Nehru Memorial teams for their wonderful support to make this evening a possibility. And last but not the least, to you, dearest audience, your support and belief is what keeps us going. As you leave this evening, may the special memories from here warm and inspire you. May we remember the contribution and sacrifices of all the people who have made and continue to work towards making India a vibrant and a great nation. Thank you, and Jai Hind.